Sometimes he goes to, God is great, God is good, let us bless for our food. Amen.
Welcome to the December 10th, 2021 meeting of the Sandusky City Commission. We'll have an invocation offered by Commissioner Waddington, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
God our Father, as we gather for this meeting this evening, give us guidance, wisdom to make the proper decisions. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Myers, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Meinzer.
Here.
Mr. Poole.
Present here.
Mr. Murray.
Here.
Mr. Brady.
Here.
Ms. Twine.
Here.
Mr. Waddington.
Here.
Mr. Harris.
Here.
Commissioners, you have before you the minutes of our meeting of November 22nd, 2021. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Waddington.
I move that we accept the minutes of the November 22nd meeting and dispense with the formal reading.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Without objection, that motion be approved. Hearing no objection, that motion is approved. Are there any residents in the audience that have questions or comments pertaining to tonight's agenda? Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. If you'll step to the podium and identify yourself and give us an address, we'll be glad to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. President, City Commissioner, staff. Tim Schwanger, 362 Sheffield Way, Sandusky. I have a number of items, so certainly somebody's going to be writing them down. Item number E on the boat launch, which is the boat launch facility, which is a 2022 agreement with the current leaseholders. I'm in favor of that. The question I would have is there anything different in the 2022 agreement versus 2021? On item number 2, which is the transfer of $500,000, I think it is, or to that amount. I don't have the exact amount on me, from the capital improvement fund to the capital projects fund. Maybe someone could explain that change, exactly what that money is going towards in that moving of dollars. Item number 5, which is the Sandusky Bay pathway, which is an increase of $146,000 and change, bringing the total cost to $2.1 million. The question would be what was the original contract amount, and also what portion of the pathway is that money going towards? Item number 6, we did go over the $45,000 above, so I don't need to ask that question. The item number 7 and number 8, which are two business grants of $100,000, I believe $50,000. I didn't see anything in the supporting documents that would indicate to the city commissioners exactly what that money's going to be used for through that project. And I think that's unfortunate. I think that whenever there's a grant application and a grant approved, that the supporting documents should show you guys exactly what that money's going to be used for. I know the EDIC committee, they have that in their records, and I think that should be transposed over to your agenda. Thank you.
Additional comments from residents regarding items on our agenda? Those questions will be addressed as that legislation comes before us. We have on our agenda a public hearing this evening regarding a proposed amendment to the zone map for 1022 Columbus Avenue. As this is a public hearing, we'll entertain questions and comments both from the audience and from commission. I believe that our chief planner, Aaron Blair, is going to be conducting that hearing remotely. Ms. Blair, are you out there?
I'm here.
Oh, you're there. Not remotely, but in person.
Than you thought.
Even better.
Good evening, thank you. So we'll be conducting the public hearing for the rezoning of the parcel at 1012 Columbus Avenue. That was a former church structure The project is going to involve that building itself and the building just to the north of this. So the building just to the north was condemned, and they have worked on stabilizing that building. They're going to create 2 apartment units. This building, their plan is to put 3 apartment units into it. It's currently zoned residential 2-family, so they were unable to put 3 units in the structure because of that zoning. We recommended that they rezone or pursue a rezoning to a residential multifamily. There's a couple things that are nice about that. One is the minimal intervention for them to be able to pursue the project, to do 3 units in that building. It also will create a logical transition from a higher intensity local business zoning district to their multifamily, if this rezoning goes through, the multifamily, and then to residential 2-family. So it's a logical progression of the intensity of uses on the zoning map. And we think it's a great use of this site. It'll add residents to this area of town, and it's walkable to downtown. It's a good reuse of a piece of historic architecture in the city. The Planning Commission did recommend that City Commission approve this rezoning, and that is on the agenda tonight. So I'm happy to answer any questions and ask the public if they have any comments.
Questions or comments from the public regarding this zone map change? Questions or comments from commission?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Poole?
I find this a good project that we should be doing. I do have a question about the building next door. In terms of, it appears that this should be a total project, that they're going someplace, because I recognize that the owner of this property owns a property next door, and this seems to be spot zoning. Why are we not zoning the entire, why are we not handling this now? What's projected to happen?
So the building just north of this that they also own, that's currently zoned local business, and they want to put 2 units of 2 apartment units in there, and that's allowed by right by that zoning category. That's also contiguous to a bunch of other local business, so we didn't see it necessary to rezone that parcel at this time. The church building itself is the one that's built, that's 2-family. They also own another parcel which will add access, so from the alley, but if we rezone that would be into the neighborhood, and we thought it was more appropriate to keep the higher intensity zoning, the multifamily, on Columbus Avenue, since that's already a high capacity corridor anyway.
So you have no intention of changing the zoning and the rest of the properties?
Just the parcel that outlines this church structure.
I mean, future, we have no intention of changing the other zoning.
It could be logical if other projects came to expand a multifamily district, because we like to keep zoning categories contiguous, to your point. We just think that from local business to 2-family, putting multifamily in the center of that is a logical progression of uses.
Okay, I'm not opposed to changing the entire area. I do have some concerns about one-stepping projects where you create this and then the public has to figure out what you're going to do next. And I think if you have a long-term plan of what you plan to do with this that is beneficial to the neighborhood, we should just tell the public that up front so there aren't any surprises down the road.
Additional questions, Commissioners? If not, I will declare this public hearing closed. Thank you, Ms. Buck. You got off the hook rather easily tonight, didn't you? Next item on our agenda is a presentation from our friends from the Witches Walk. I believe that Ms. Bretz is here to give us some good news.
See, I don't do this a lot.
You're doing a good job hiding that board.
Yeah, I did that on purpose. Thanks. So, this was a very good year for Witches Walk, and I'm here with my team members, Jared Walters, Bobby Daughtery, Steve Andrus, and Ed Ostheimer, and it is our pleasure to present the Sandusky Recreation Scholarship Program with $5,000.
Wow.
Very good year for us. This is always my favorite time because earlier today we presented $15,000 to the Senior Center for the Meals on Wheels program. So this year, we were able to give a total of $20,000.
Wow. Wow, very meaningful. I can't tell you how many people, when they see you out in public like that, they say, what is going on? What is that? I don't mind giving an explanation now because how meaningful this is and the real bottom line that you provide, not just to this city, but to people that really need it.
Yeah, we had participants from Florida. We had 12 people
Wow.
from Florida this year that came. And so, they come from everywhere. So hopefully, the city will be able to turn this into the whole Halloween town, the whole month of October.
We agree.
Very good.
Thank you so
thank you.
much.
Salem, here we come.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, sure.
I don't want to bomb it here.
Commissioners, you have before you several communications from staff recommending various pieces of legislation. Can I have a motion to accept these communications?
So moved.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Without objection, the motion be approved, and hearing no objection, that motion is approved. Commissioners, we have 6 items on our agenda this evening. Do any of you wish to move any of these items to the regular agenda? If not, Ms. Myers, will you present the consent agenda?
Yes, Mr. President. Item A, the 2022 Mills Creek Golf Course fees change, second reading. Item B, State of Ohio Annual Physical Audit. Item 3, permission to participate in internet sales in calendar year 2022. Item D, Ohio EPA license to operate fee for Big Island Waterworks calendar year 2022. Item E, Shelby Street Boat Launch Facility Agreement 2022. Item F, 5-year agreement with Axon Enterprise Incorporated for body-worn cameras for Sandusky Police Department.
Having heard these ordinances and resolution, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Harris.
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda items A, B, C, D, E, and F, and declaring that all ordinances and/or resolutions as drafted and presented to the City Commission under the consent agenda shall take effect in accordance with the section reflected in ordinances and/or resolutions, whether it be in accordance with Section 13 or 14 of the City Charter.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. Myers, will you poll the commission on the motion, please?
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Poole,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Ms. Twine,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
And now on the ordinances and resolution.
Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Poole,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Ms. Twine,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington,
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Those ordinances and resolution are passed. We'll turn to our regular agenda. Ms. Myers, you present item number 1 on the regular agenda.
It's requested an ordinance be passed amending the official zone map of the City of Sandusky to rezone partial number 57-68035.000 located at 1012 Columbus Avenue from R2F 2-family residential district to RMF multifamily residential district, and declaring that this ordinance shall take effect under suspension of the rules as contained in and in accordance with Section 13 of the City Charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Twine.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 13 of the City Charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. I think we had a pretty good discussion during the public hearing. No additional questions, commissioners? Ms. Myers, will you call the roll on that motion, please?
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Poole,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Ms. Twine,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington, Mr. Harris,
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Poole,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Ms. Twine,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington,
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
That ordinance is passed. Ms. Myers, you present item number 2, please.
It's requested a resolution be passed authorizing the transfer of funds from the Capital Improvement Fund to the Capital Projects Fund and declaring that this resolution shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this resolution, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Waddington.
I move for the adoption of this resolution under suspension of rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Discussion. Ms. Reader, I wonder if you would provide us with an answer to Mr. Schwanger's question regarding where this money is going to, where it's coming from, and how it's being used.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commission President. So this is an annual transfer that we do. The funds initially go into the Capital Improvement Fund. It's 5% of every dollar that we receive in income tax dollars goes into this Capital Improvement Fund. Then we need legislation to take those funds from Capital Improvement over to the Capital Projects Fund. So that's what this transfer of $585,000 is for. The projects will include things that have already been approved through commission, such as the police vehicles, street projects, and public works projects. This transfer just places the money from capital improvement over to the Capital Projects Fund. And again, we have to do this annually.
And I understand, Mr. Reader, that I recall that we do this every year, and what you're telling me, 5% tells me that you've got a little plus of $10 million in income tax that you're using the 5% on.
Correct.
So it's a normal transfer. You're not moving, it's not a shell game where you're moving money from one account to another.
No, and ORC is what requires us to bring legislation to move the funds from one fund to the other.
Excellent explanation. Thanks for that.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Poole.
I'm just curious. Ma'am, why do we put it in one fund and then move it to the other rather than budget it where we want it to be spent? At the beginning of the year, why are we moving it? I should say, why do we start at some place that we know we have to move it?
Through the Commission President to Mr. Poole, it's a fair question. We've always, at the city, had two different funds, one being the Capital Improvement Fund, and that's where we stated the income tax dollars would be the Capital Improvement Fund. And then we have a second fund, Capital Projects, is where we've expended everything out of. We can probably look at changing that in the future. I'd have to get with the law department and see if that's a possibility.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, and the reason I bring this up is the question that was asked is he wants to know what the money's being spent on. So do you have that specific line item information? We're moving $585,000 for specific projects. It would, if it had been included in the information, he wouldn't have had to ask. But how much money of that 585 goes to how many different projects, and how much to each project? That's what the question's about.
Through the Commission President to Mr. Poole, the police vehicles was $111,225.05 of that. We have another $195,800 going to resurfacing programs. And then we also have planning projects and helping out with the Justice Center is another $6,800. And then we're looking at design of $271,000. And those are round figures, but the total is the $585,000.
What was the 271 being spent on?
That was design and building.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Chairman, going forward for next year, I think we should take a good look at what we're actually spending our money on so that we know ahead of time how much money is being spent on these various projects. This big lump sum of money raises eyebrows within the public because here we are at this point of the year and don't even know what it was to be spent on. Public is not really in the loop with this, I don't believe. So thank you.
Any additional questions, Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Mudge.
I do have one question, I think, for through, or Ms. Reader, this is for the past year or for 2022? And also, just a comment, in the past, we had a capital equipment replacement budget that we had short-term, mid-term, long-term, where we could see what capital projects and capital equipment replacements that would be needed and what time period they would be needed so we could budget accordingly. I don't know if that's something we still keep. It's a moving target every year because this piece of equipment goes to heck and this piece, has to move back. But it might help other people to look at that schedule to see what's scheduled to replace in 3 years or 5 years or 10 years. That was a comment. But so is this one for next year that we're moving money?
Through the commission president to Commissioner Meiser. So this is for the current year of what we've spent this year. All these expenditures are over $10,000. So these were brought to commission for approval to spend the funds. This just moves the money. So again, when we brought the legislation, we said coming out of the capital projects funds, and that's where the expenses come out of. This just moves the cash from the capital improvement fund over to the capital projects fund.
Sure. We spent the money.
Correct. And we do have the capital project. We'll be having a capital plan. I know Public Works Department, Aaron Klein's been working on that. We hope to have that to you guys, the first part of next year within the first quarter. The last 2 years with COVID had kind of been up in the air. So you have not seen a capital plan in 2020 or 2021, but going forward, we'll continue to provide that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Murray.
Ms. Reader made the main point that I was going to make, thank you. But I also wanted to just make a pitch for keeping the accounting the way it is, because that way it clearly stops, and we have a pool where you can look to and say, this is the percentage of the income tax that is required by our ordinance to be placed in the capital improvement project, and then it's transferred from there to the other fund. I realize it can be a little bit confusing and maddening, but I think it makes for cleaner accounting, so I would advocate for leaving it the way it is.
Additional comments, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Poole.
I don't disagree totally with you, Mr. Murray. I just recognize that at the beginning of the year, somehow explaining better what we're spending this money on. For example, and I'll ask the treasurer, finance director, section 6,000, transportation, what's included in that under capital improvement?
Through the commission president, Commissioner Poole, we have that capital where it's kind of broken down into different departments, and that transportation could be vehicles, or it could be something if the transit needs some kind of capital equipment. There's a couple different options as far as using that transportation funds.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Chairman, what I want to point out here is $100,000 of this capital improvement, this big 585, is to go to those items. Security of persons and property, I'm not sure whether that represents what that represents and what she described we're spending this money on. That's the difference here. We've got money that we're moving from transportation. I don't see any of that 100,000 going into transit. I'm not sure, and nor do I understand what the section on security of persons and property, what she described, where that $100,000 go. That's what needs to be cleared up. Whether we keep the capital improvements and move it is fine, but at the beginning of the year, I think this year, take a little closer look of a better explanation of where you plan on moving it later on. Because buying police cars could be under section 1,000 or section 6,000, I think. I'm not sure. It's interpretive, I guess. But I agree with Mr. Meiser. We've got some issues here, things we need to be looking at. Thank you.
Ms. Myers, you call the roll on the motion, please.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Poole,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes?
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Ms. Twine,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
And now on the resolution.
Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Poole,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Ms. Twine,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
That resolution is passed. Ms. Myers, we present item number 3, please.
It's requested an ordinance be passed authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into a 4-year contract with Cintas Corporation of Sandusky, Ohio, for the supply and service of uniforms for city personnel for the period of February 1st, 2022 through January 31st, 2026, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Chairs.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Mr. Klein, for as long as I can remember, we've been doing business with this company for this product. I wonder if you'd share with us, if you can, is there differences in this contract from one year to the next?
Yes, sir, Mr. President. Cintas has been doing business with the city since I've been here 8.5 years ago. The contract is essentially the same. About 4 years ago, we went through and looked at all the uniforms, looked at everything they had to offer, shorts, long sleeve shirts, like everything that they had. Went through the union, started going through everything, and it came out that they wanted the exact same things that they had before. So we're keeping it status quo, and we're moving forward just as we have in the past, and the union members and the employees are happy with the uniforms that they're getting and the service we get.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Commissioners, questions or comments? Ms. Myers, you call the roll on the motion, please.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington? Mr. Harris?
Yes.
That ordinance is passed. Ms. Myers, if you'll present item number 4, please.
It's requested an ordinance be passed authorizing and directing the city manager to enter an agreement for the purchase and installment of a replacement virtual environment system from Computers at Work Incorporated of Naples, Florida, DBA Vitecchio, through the State of Ohio Department of Administrative Services Cooperative Purchasing Program, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, have you heard this ordinance? What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Twine.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Murray.
I would like to ask that Mr. Hamilton explain to us what it is that we are purchasing. It seems like it's a combination of services and hardware, but I couldn't really follow it from the communication. Apologize, I should have reached out over the weekend to ask you.
Through you, Commission President, to Commissioner Murray. 4 years ago, we made the investment to move over to a virtual environment. What that means is, instead of buying pieces of hardware for everything that we need, we buy one piece of hardware and we can run it all on top of that one piece of hardware. So it gives you a lot of hardware cost savings by not having to buy something every single time. It also brings a lot of resilience and security, because when you're running on a virtual environment, you can do things on the fly instead of having to wait and order new hardware. You can constantly move things along. The original investment came with a 3-year warranty and support. For obvious reasons, this was slated to be replaced last year, but because of funding shortfalls, we didn't. So we found someone who could support us through an extra year in case we had a critical fallout. So this is now coming to fruition. What it is replacing all of our existing hardware. So everything that's running in the virtual environment. The services portion of this is minimal. That's basically them just coming in, plugging it in, field testing it before it comes up. What this really is a set of 3 servers and a storage array. They run in a redundant fashion, so you can lose one of them or 2 of them at any point in time, and the other ones will pick up the load. So this is 95% hardware costs. The software, you need this stuff to be in support. because as things get older, the software vendors will only support certain hardware infrastructures, and as they get older, they stop supporting them, so you can't stay up to date. And nowadays, you have to stay up to date with your software for patching, for security reasons. The total cost of this project is $133,804.41 from the state term contract. So to give you a rough idea of the scale of savings, for the amount of servers that we run on this equipment, had we bought the physical servers for that, we would be paying nearly 3 times this amount of money. So by using this virtualized technology, it gives us that flexibility, and it also saves us having to buy a lot of extra hardware.
Do you understand that?
As much as I want to.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I want to say something, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Sure.
So when you came to Sandusky, and this is no criticism of anyone else, but talked to some other institutions in the community, and when you came to Sandusky, our security, our IT security was essentially the equivalent of leaving all the doors unlocked, open, the windows open, the windows broken, and anybody could have come in and done anything they wanted. And you brought, I'm exaggerating, of course, to an extent, but you brought a level of sophistication to the security system that we have and the services, the IT services that we offer, that has just been outstanding, and I just wanted to publicly say thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Good job. Additional comments or questions, Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Meiser?
I'm sorry, I don't follow the
I
finance.
know you don't understand this.
The finance, I understand IT more than the finance right now, actually. So I'm just trying to clarify. So now this came out of IT's budget. So would this be a major expendable that we budgeted earlier in the year, or is this one of these capital projects that it's gonna come out of that some 500 some thousand we're approving tonight?
Through you, Commission President, this was budgeted in the IT budget. So at the beginning of the year, when I put my budget together, this was included in that. So this is not out of the transfer.
Okay, so that would be a major expendable.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hamilton, whenever elderly people like myself see the word virtual, I wonder, are we getting something physical, or are we getting something that's in someone's mind? You see where I'm coming from? So that runs a red flag up for me, and we had quite a discussion at noon today, Mr. Murray and I did, and I was embarrassed, I think, to say that I didn't have a clue what we were buying here, but you've given us a good explanation, and I thank you for that, and I feel like, as I think each commissioner does, I feel like we are in good hands, in your hands.
Yep.
Thank you. Mr. Myers, you call roll on the motion, please.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington? Mr. Harris?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
That ordinance is passed. Ms. Myers, you present item number 5, please.
It's requested an ordinance be passed authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into an agreement, an amendment to the agreement for professional design services with Environmental Design Group, LLC, of Akron, Ohio, for the Sandusky Bay Pathway, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Waddington?
I move for this adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Mr. Klein, I know that this is a kind of a two-part ordinance. I wonder if you would give us an explanation of both pieces of this ordinance.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. The first piece that I would like to get to is something that we've done on a regular basis is when we have a project that is funded, we leverage that fund we use that money that's already allocated to the project to leverage additional funds. So what we did on Water Street, on East Water Street from Shoreline Drive all the way to Meggs, we already had it under contract to go through design for the pathway. Essentially, that's from the north curb to the right-of-way where the sidewalk currently is. So what we did is we went to the MPO and asked for additional funds so we could include the street as part of the project. In 2020, we found out we were awarded around $475,000, and that would be for the street portion of the project. So now we can do the entire roadway. We can do the entire length from Shoreline Drive to Meggs, including the road. What the additional cost is to actually design that portion of the street. So we need to do additional survey, we need to look at titles, we need to do bump outs, new curbs, and most importantly, we need to do new drainage if we do those bump outs. So the cost that is included in this amendment request is for that work that would be for the roadway piece. We're not doing anything additional to the bike path because that was already included in the original contract. As far as a timeline, we are expecting to submit plans to ODOT around April of next year. So we've got about 4.5 months to do this work, to do all the design. And construction would start around May of 2023. June of 2023. We're bidding in May. So that's the first piece, and that's around $86,000. The second piece, I'd like to try to share my screen if that's okay. I think it'll provide a lot of clarity. The second piece is over on West Monroe, right before you get to Sloan, just west of Sloan. We have the design of the pathway, if you can see my cursor, coming all the way through on the north side of West Monroe and then coming up Sloan Street as you proceed to the north and then down Madison. Well, as you can see, we're taking up all of the parking and access to Benny Byington's Patina Creek, where he has a lot of storage and he often has trucks and vehicles parked in this area. In addition, we're crossing a couple driveways and in front of Clee and Associates, which is a plumbing contractor. So what he proposed when he saw that we were taking up all of this, we talked to Benny, and as we do with all of our agreements, and we try to work with everybody from whom we're trying to acquire property. What he asked is, there's an old rail right-of-way that runs between the two buildings, north-southwesterly, right through here. He was asking if we would be interested in rerouting the path through that area, and what he could do is he would agree to help look for maybe artwork. We could do artwork in that. We could clean up the sides of these buildings, string some lights from the top, and it would create just a really, really interesting, really unique feature for the pathway. If you can envision that kind of peddler's alley type feel with artwork on either side of these walls. So that was what the proposal is and what the thought is. You know, to me, the big thing to me is the safety aspect that it would create not being on West Monroe. I took my bike down there a couple times, and it's not fun at all. So those are the two amendments that we would be looking for the design. In that one, we would have to do right-of-way acquisition with the railroad, and we would also have to do the title and other acquisition services. So that one's about just under 58,000. So to answer the question from the public earlier, the original contract was $1,948,871. This additional $143,642 would bring the contract just under $2.1 million for design and acquisition services.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Commissioners, questions or comments? Ms. Myers, will you call the roll on the motion, please?
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington? Mr. Harris?
Yes.
That ordinance is passed. Ms. Myers, you present item number 6, please.
It's requested an ordinance be passed authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Towboat Marine LLC of Sandusky, Ohio, for the operation and management of the Paper District Marina, approving a new fee schedule for the Paper District Marina, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Meiser.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the City Charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Murray.
given my interest in another transient marina, I will be abstaining on the legislation.
So noted. Ms. Myers, will you call roll on the motion, please?
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Poole,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Abstain?
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Ms. Twine,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington, Mr. Harris,
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Poole,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Abstain?
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Ms. Twine,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington, Mr. Harris.
Yes.
That ordinance is passed. Ms. Myers, will you present item number 7, please?
It's requested an ordinance be passed authorizing and approving a grant in the amount of $50,000 through the Economic Development Fund Program to Name One Yellowstone LLC in relation to the property located at 333 Washington Street, Sandusky, and declaring this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the City Charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Meiser.
I move for adoption of this ordinance on suspension of the rules in full accordance with 14 City Charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Discussion. Mr. Holliday, I see you rising and heading for the podium. I'm counting on you giving us an explanation of what we're doing here.
Happy to, Commissioner. This project was initially presented to the city before the pandemic, at which time the Economic Development Committee recommended that we provide a grant for $50,000. As we all know, the pandemic had a major impact on the city's finances, and when that happened, the city reduced the grant amount to $10,000. The developer reapproached us earlier this year, and recognizing that the city's financial position had improved, asked that the grant amount be raised back up to $50,000. We took that request to the Economic Development Committee, and they agreed that based on the project's parameters, the city should be providing a grant in the amount of $50,000, which we're here before you tonight for your approval of. This project consists of an investment of over $2 million into this property on Washington Street. The property is being converted into 9 short-term rental units. It's really a magnificent renovation, historically accurate. It's going to be a tremendous place for out-of-town visitors and local visitors to stay overnight. The development team is highly accomplished, led by Mr. Brent Zimmerman. He's a local to the Cleveland area brewer and also real estate developer. The team is doing a fantastic job on the renovation. They're nearing completion, and we would recommend that the city provide the grant in this amount to support this truly amazing project. And just to answer the question from the resident, our dollars will be going specifically towards the construction costs of the project.
Thank you, Mr. Holliday. Comments or questions, Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Murray.
I did think that the idea that we, as commissioners, also see what went before the economic edict, I thought that was a good idea, and I would encourage staff to give that some further consideration.
Would you say, I missed that, it was muffled.
I'd just like to see the background communications or data or documents that are supplied to the economic development, or the economic, whatever it is, edict.
Yes.
If they're going to take a look at that, I'd sort of like to eyeball that so I get a better picture of what's going on. It made sense to me.
I tend to, Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Poole.
Yeah, I also agree. This project was projected at $640,000, and you now just tell us there's $2 million. What was brought to the table that we have not seen any evidence of changes in this from what we agreed to begin with, just makes it iffy trying to vote for it. I mean, just recognize we're doing this pretty much on faith. They presented a project, said this was about what it would cost. I'm not sure, is it a hotel now?
It's technically classified as a hotel, given the number of units. In addition to increasing the dollar amount, they've increased the number of units that are going to be in the property, so major increase in the scope of the project. But yes, it's technically classified for purposes of the building department and also state fire codes as a hotel.
Does that change anything? What does that change in terms of revenues and so forth? What's it do?
I can't speak to any changes in the revenue, but I can speak to the permitting process. I know there were some minor changes to the permitting process through the building department, and I believe that involves now the state fire marshal from a permitting standpoint, given the change of the classification.
Thank you. Just moving forward, it'd be, if you're going to make a major change to something that we approved a year ago, being brought up to speed as it changes would be really appreciated. Thank you.
I agree. It might be helpful to all of us to see some financial background on what the investment is. You're telling us now it's $2 million, and I can tell you that we historically have been in it with developers on a 10% basis. So irregardless of whether it's $640,000 or $2 million, this particular developer has certainly met that litmus test of a $50,000 buy-in by our city. I've driven by that now practically every day for the last year, and I can tell you our investment matches that. It certainly is much more than the $500,000 that, or much more than the $640,000 that I think they were originally projecting. So I'm confident that I understand that our investment is meant to be in transformative projects. I believe something like that in that end of town and on Washington Street can be and will be transformative. So I'm certainly supportive of that.
Chairman, one last thing.
Commissioner Poole.
I recognize, and maybe I misread this, but we've already granted we've already granted them $10,000, and it doesn't seem to address taking that away. So I don't want to add 50 to the 10 that we already promised. I want to be sure we're not doing that.
We didn't, correct me if I'm wrong, but we haven't done that.
Well, I realize you didn't give it to him. I'm talking about what's owed. We granted an ordinance that granted him $10,000. Whether we gave it to him yet or not, it's still on the table. And adding 50 makes it 60, unless we make sure.
And I'm sure the law director can add to my comments here, but the grant agreement is written to terminate any prior commitments, including that one for the $10,000. Our intention and our commitment is to only provide a total of $50,000. I would defer to the law director with any other comments on it.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner
before the law director say they might be on this, but I just going back, we approved $50,000, correct?
No, 10.
The first time we had this discussion?
The committee approved 50.
We approved 10.
The committee approved 15.
They brought you 10.
Oh, okay.
We approved 10.
I don't remember going back to 10.
This was when we were underwater in spring of 2020.
Okay.
Pardon sorry, I didn't mean to be out of
I think we get it now, don't we?
Yeah, okay. Okay. For some reason in my mind, it was a $50,000 request.
Brennan, go ahead.
Sure, through you, Commission President. Director Holliday is exactly correct. The legislation as proposed and the actual grant agreement would supersede any previous things. Also, we've not expended the $10,000. That's not how our economic development grants work. Everything has to be checked and approved before any money actually goes out the door. So there's no money out the door. The legislation that's before you would approve a total of $50,000, a new grant agreement, and that grant agreement would take precedence and supersede any previous, and it's intentionally designed to do that. And so it would be for just a total of $50,000.
I think that satisfies us. Mr. Mines.
Chairman, I agree with you. It's a beautiful property, and I will guarantee that anything that they projected to cost $600,000 pre-COVID has exponentially went up. The lumber prices have quadrupled at least. Materials you can't get, labor shortage. It's crazy right now the last year or two, year and a half trying to get any construction done. So I guarantee they didn't anticipate that.
Excellent. Additional comments, Commissioner? Ms. Myers, you call the roll on the motion, please?
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Poole,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Ms. Twine,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Poole,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Ms. Twine,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington,
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
That ordinance is passed. Ms. Myers, you present item number 8, please.
Yes, Mr. President. It's requested an ordinance be passed authorizing and approving a grant in the amount of $100,000 through the Economic Development Fund Program to Everwild Spirits LLC in relation to the property located at 212 Hancock Street, Sandusky, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Waddington.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Mr. Holliday, once again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know the committee, or the commission rather, heard about this project at a past meeting, but just to reiterate, Everwild Spirits is in the process of creating Sandusky's first bourbon distillery. This is going to be a truly amazing project representing an investment of over $2 million. It will create 12 jobs with an annual payroll of at least $300,000, and it'll put Sandusky on the map when it comes to bourbon distillery. We know that there's a growing trend of bourbon distillery tourism. So really an exciting project that's going to create a year-round destination here in Sandusky. I'm joined this evening by Rick Lynch, the president of the company. The Economic Development Committee recommended a grant in the amount of $100,000 towards this project, and I would encourage your approval of that this evening. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. Oh, and just to point out, lastly, again, our funding will be going towards the construction costs that the developer has to transform the property into the distillery.
Mr. Holliday, I did read somewhere in the background information that the total amount of this project is plus $2 million.
Correct.
So we're $100,000 on the $2 million project.
Correct.
Excellent. Comments or questions, Commissioner?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Meiser?
I think it's important to note that it's reimbursable as well. It's after the construction, everything is done, that we will, if we vote on this tonight, award the $100,000. I did read where the federal, I would think the biggest loopholes is going to get, licensing and all this stuff from the ATF and state and maybe even some local government things that were, has that all been looked at, or all the hoops been jumped through?
I'll defer to Mr. Lynch on that, but I know his team has been working very hard to make sure everything is in place to be able to operate, including, I believe, a federal permit to do the distilling. And we'll certainly be here to assist with any local items that may come up. But if you'd like to hear from Mr. Lynch, I'm sure he can address that more thoroughly.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I also feel like I may have to abstain from this because I really like bourbon.
You stole my thunder.
Wow.
Mr. President, thank you. Thank you,
Sir.
gentlemen, ladies. In terms of the licensing, we have been issued our federal license from the TTB. The state license, we're in process. We've submitted the application. We actually won't be able to have them come in and inspect until the building is completed, the equipment's installed. But everything is on track, and there's no concerns that won't be issued.
It won't be an issue?
Not anything that's at this point a roadblock to hold that up.
Additional comments or questions for Mr. Lynch, Commissioners? Thank you, Mr. Lynch. I will, unlike Mr. Meiser's reason for abstaining, I will have to abstain, and it's not because I intend to drink Mr. Lynch's bourbon. I do intend to do that, but it is because a company that I have an ownership in may be a vendor of his in this project, so I will abstain from that vote. Mr. Meiser, you have your own reasons.
No.
Mr. Myers, will you call roll on the motion, please?
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Poole,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Brady,
Abstain.
Ms. Twine,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Poole,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Brady,
Abstain.
Ms. Twine,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
That ordinance passed even without my support. Ms. Myers, you call the roll on agenda item number 9, please.
It's requested an ordinance be passed authorizing and directing the city manager to expend funds to Garland DBS Incorporated of Cleveland, Ohio, through the U.S. Communities Government Purchasing Alliance for the Service Center Repair and Restoration Project, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Twine.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Motion and a second discussion. Mr. Klein, you're still at your post. It appears that we're going to be spending some money on about a 20-year-old facility.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. This service center is about 20 years old, just over 20 years old after it was repurposed. I was looking a little bit ago at one of the emails to try to find during a recent rain event, one of the employees out there said that he counted 12 leaks through the roof at various locations and saw water coming in through the walls. So this is a project that we've been had on our radar for quite some time, and it feels good to finally move forward with it. So what we'll be getting for the $530,000 is roofing and waterproofing, gutters, downspouts, new hatches and safety rails, skylight and fall protection, and then even some tuck pointing and wall coatings on the exterior walls of the facility. So each one of those has a warranty associated with it as well, depending on each item. And, we have Garland's going to be overseeing and managing all the work and all the contract work that's going to be done, including the subcontractors. So hopefully we can get this done by spring before we get some big rains.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Commissioners, comments or questions? Ms. Myers, will you call the roll on the motion, please?
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Meinzer.
Yes.
Mr. Poole.
Yes.
Mr. Murray.
Yes.
Mr. Brady.
Yes.
Ms. Twine.
Yes.
Mr. Waddington.
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Meinzer.
Yes.
Mr. Poole.
Yes.
Mr. Murray.
Yes.
Brady.
Yes.
Ms. Twine.
Yes.
Mr. Waddington.
Yes.
And Mr. Harris.
Yes.
That ordinance is passed. That concludes our agenda. We'll turn to our city manager for his report.
Thank you, Commission President Brady, all commissioners, audience, and staff. I'll start with the donations. First, a donation of $10,000 was received from Tusing Builders for the K-9 program. I'd ask for a motion to accept that generous donation.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Without objection, that motion be approved, and hearing no objection, that motion is approved with our thanks to Tusing Builders.
Next, a donation of $500 from Michael Osborne, also for the K-9 program.
So moved.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Without objection, that motion be approved. Hearing no objection, that motion is approved. Our thanks to Mr. Osborne.
A thank you to Firelands Hospital for the donation of 50 hams to feed our police officers and their families for the holidays. I'd ask for a motion to accept that.
So moved.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Without objection, the motion be approved. Hearing no objection, that motion is approved with our thanks to Firelands Hospital.
Then the City of Sandusky Recreation Department would like to thank the following restaurants and food trucks for their donation of lunches to the winter break camp scheduled for later this month, including Pizza House East, Lee's Chicken, Berardi's Family Kitchen, Franchetti's, Chick-fil-A, and Taco Bus. I'd ask for a motion for that donation.
So move.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Without objection, the motion be approved. Hearing no objection, that motion is approved with our thanks to those restaurants.
Moving on to new business for the fire department, about a month ago, the fireboat sustained a blown engine. Fleet maintenance foreman Troy Vaccaro had been working with the Mercury engine supplier and other options to replace the motor. There's no viable solution to repair the blown engine. The motors in the boat are currently 2006 motors. Due to supply chain issues, 2 new boat motors would be at least a year to receive. According to the conversation with the vendor, Troy is in discussions with the situation with federal officials and learned that 2 engines were on the GSA, or General Service Administration, auctions from a Florida law enforcement agency. Late Friday and December 2nd, the auction site bid to purchase the used motors was successful at $27,475 for both. This was an emergency need to obtain the 2 motors and have them mounted and in service as soon as possible so that fire can respond to water emergencies. The motors still have a warranty through Mercury until July of 2022. It's requested that a motion to approve the emergency purchase of 2 boat motors for the fire boat be approved, with a formal communication being prepared for the December 21st meeting. I'd ask for that motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second, discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Meiser.
This goes back to with me, it might be just a pet peeve of mine, but the capital things, I mean, we just spent $530 on it. It might have been a major expendable that was budgeted for earlier in the year that I didn't pay attention to, but things like lawnmowers or booms on trucks and vehicles, I mean, emergency legislation and just coming up and look for something at the last minute doesn't really concern me too much, but like the lift station generators went out and we're scrambling around trying, I mean, that's a health issue. A safety issue, fireboat engines are going out or fire, these types of things that I'm thinking about, like, was this, is it already past its useful life? Has this been planned for? Is anybody paying attention? Had the generator lift station, I'm hopefully there is a plan to replace all of this stuff within a certain time frame, because it seems to me, right, sitting here, that things, we just wait till go to heck, and then we're hurry scrambling around trying to fix things. We're going to buy used boat engines that we're using in salt water, which really affects the longevity of an engine. And obviously the state of Florida does have some capital replacement because they're getting rid of these things already. Well, they still got a year of budget. So hopefully in the legislation, they'll, it'll include the hours on the engine, what went wrong, why it went wrong, and when they project to buy new engines, because they're a year out for the change orders, for the change of supply. So if we do buy these, we got to turn right around and order engines, because it's going to be a year or two before you get them. So that's just my comment. So, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I tend to follow the same line of thinking as Commissioner Meiser. I'm not going to support this because I think that spending this money now on boats, the bay's going to freeze here shortly, and I think and whether it does or doesn't is an issue. I don't think buying used engines when we should be buying new. The supply chain issue, the supply chain may correct itself in the next 4 or 5 months. I don't think that this boat is critical for our use between now and next summer. And buying an engine that by the time we get it, there might be, 3 months on the warranty? The warranty's up in July of next year. This doesn't make a lot of sense to me to spend this money unless you give me some more information that indicates how badly this is needed. Like the boat goes out December and January. We got a history of saving people 4, 5, 6 times in the winter on this boat. That would justify spending the money. And none of that's been presented. This is just, it blew up a month ago. I'm just hearing about it today. It's an emergency. Give us this money. And then we'll figure out what to do if it even works. If these saltwater motors last any length of time, obviously, as he said, Florida's getting rid of them. So I think perhaps we may reconsider our options and see how badly we actually need these. But I can't support spending this money at this time. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. I have some familiarity with the availability of boat engines, and it's absolutely right. I mean, these aren't going to be available anytime soon. This is a good solution. People are waiting now well over a year for new engines, any kind of boat engines. That's just, the lots of different reasons, but that's the reality out there. And I do think I would not have expected these engines to go. I don't know why. They're not of an age that I would have expected them to go, but they did. And I think it's incumbent on us to be able to launch a boat into the water and be able to help people or property as need be, so that we can do a rescue. Otherwise, I think we're just sitting on the sidelines and sending, like all the people in Congress that just send prayers. That's not enough. You need to send a boat.
Mr. Chairman, we do have a Coast Guard that's as close as we are. So it's not like I'm suggesting that we leave people out on the
No, I don't
bay.
mean that.
I'm not suggesting that nothing's going to be done. I suggest that we don't need to spend this money immediately, but I take your point.
Commissioner Meiser?
The Coast Guard will call Sandusky Fire when the boats are aground and are in trouble off sea. They're not in. Coast Guard out of Detroit will come. But just an example, we were out on Route 2, there's a blizzard, we had a semi-truck running into a bunch of cars, you couldn't see the vehicles, and also we got to call some fishermen out on off Cedar Point that were in trouble. Blowing and snowing, you couldn't even see it, like, what they do, I didn't even believe it, but that does happen. In January, it starts right away. Walleye fishing starts 1st of April, and those are the most dangerous months, the weather, the water, hypothermia, and those sort of things. So I'm gonna vote for this. I just would like to see a little more planning. I don't know, 2006 engines, I don't know if they have low hours or what happened, but that's where I always like to see something projected out, like, even the maintenance on that building, we just got it paid off, but I didn't know we were going to spend another $500,000 on it already, so.
I hope we're not going to get into the business of trying to predict catastrophes. None of us know when that's going to happen, whether it's next week or next month, or whether the ice freezes over. I don't have a clue when that's going to happen. And I'm not willing to roll the dice for $26,000 to put someone in the drink that we can't fish out with a couple of old motors. If they ran salt water and they run when they get here, I'm going to be good with that. $26,000 to save someone's life or multiple people's lives, I think is a risk worth taking, so I certainly am supportive of that.
And through the commission president to the commissioners, Commissioner Meinzer, I think your points about capital planning are well taken. I think the city, because of its difficult financial circumstances, for decades had underfunded capital infrastructure generally, but even more specifically, city facilities, vehicles, equipment, because that's not what the public sees. And there's always external pressure to invest in those things that more directly benefit the public, although we all know that the vehicles, the facilities, and the equipment that we serve the public with, when they don't work or fail, are a big challenge. We have worked hard to both put more dollars into catching up on those visible infrastructures, as you've seen with investments in parks and streets and sidewalks and trees. We're trying really hard now to catch up on facilities. The investment that we're making in the service center, I would argue, 5-10 years ago, is something they would have probably put off rather than made, but it would have ended up costing more in the long run. And just a reminder that $700,000 annually of that new deal with Cedar Point goes specifically to maintenance of city properties, safety capital, which would be a good example of what could fund, these types of projects, and then property maintenance capital in addition to streets. But we specifically created those categories because we knew that the city would always have an incentive to underinvest in those sort of back of office type things that are critical foundational pieces to our infrastructure maintenance, but aren't necessarily always going to be popular with commissioners or citizens. So.
Thank you.
To understand, do we have Mr. Whoops, you're asking for a motion to approve that purchase?
Yes.
Do we have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Yeah, I think we did. Discussion.
A motion and a second discussion.
Mr. Chairman, you've convinced me that it's worth the $26,000.
Wow. Wow.
We're getting close to Christmas.
Be still my heart. Because it is $26,000, I'm going to ask Mr. Myers to poll the commission on this.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
That motion is passed.
Moving on to finance, the Regional Income Tax Agency, commonly referred to as RETA, has sent out non-filer letters to taxpayers that they believe need to file a city income tax return. Taxpayers can simply e-file returns or exemptions on Rita's website at www.ritaohio.com or mail or fax the necessary documents to Rita to comply with the tax filing requirement. For Public Works, we want to welcome new employees, John Post at Big Island Waterworks and Matthew Rowe in sewer maintenance. Also, 2 intersections will transition to all-way stops on December 21st. The intersections of Water and Decatur will become a 4-way stop to improve visibility for all motorists. 44th and Hancock Street will become a 3-way stop to enhance walkability and pedestrian safety at the new Sandusky Early Learning Academy, which is replacing the former Hancock School. Also, streets and traffic staff have successfully collected leaves from each zone in the city and are currently moving through the last round in each. If residents cannot meet the schedule, there will be a drop-off for bagged leaves near the Marquette Drive entrance to the city service center 7 days a week until January 21st. And then finally, in preparation for winter, the docks at the Shelby Street boat launch will be removed on Tuesday, December 14th. For economic development, the city's application for $500,000 in grant funds to conduct environmental assessments of brownfield properties was submitted to the US EPA November 29th. Awards are expected to be announced in spring of 2022. A few meetings for community development, arts and culture is scheduled for Tuesday, December 14th at 5:15. Landmark is scheduled for Wednesday, December 15th at 5 p.m. Board of Zoning Appeals is scheduled for Thursday, December 16th at 4:30. And Planning Commission is scheduled for Wednesday, December 22nd at 5 p.m. An update on transit, James Stacy III started working with the city as the transit administrator on December 1st. The Community Development Department is happy to have him on board. And then finally for recreation, registration is filling up fast for the winter break camp at Sandusky High. The dates for the 2-week camp are Monday through Wednesday, December 20th through the 27th, and also December 27th through the 29th. Registration is available at cityofsandusky.com/recreation. And then the Santa Hustle Race Series will have their annual 5K, half marathon, and kids fun run this Sunday, December 19th from the Jackson Street Pier and Mylander Pavilion. Historically, that have been held at Cedar Point, so it's nice to see that event coming into the heart of the city. The 5K and kids fun run courses run through downtown Sandusky. The half marathon course showcases several neighborhoods in the city, as well as Perkins Township. For details on what streets will be impacted for the race, visit Sandusky Rec's Facebook page. Those interested in volunteering for the event can contact Jason Whirling at jwherling, JWERLING at ci.sandusky.oh.us. And registration for all events is still available at the Santa Hustle race site. That concludes my remarks for this evening. I'm happy to answer any questions or take comments. Thank you.
Commissioners, comments or questions for the city manager? Not, we'll turn to items of old business. Any items of old business, Commissioner?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner
I
Meiden?
tell you that too much tonight, you're going to put the gavel on me. I just was going over the schedule, and I don't want to put anybody, I don't want to put Jason on the spot or Ms. Whoops or anybody, any city employees on the spot, but the schedule, fee schedule for Mills Golf Course. I haven't golfed in quite a few years because I have some injuries to my shoulders, so I don't know what the fees are. The one thing that stands out to me when I look at the schedule is seniors get a discount, military gets a discount, employees get a discount. It seems like everybody gets a discount but the residents of Sandusky. So, and it's cheaper by $100 for a pass. When I look at the median household income of the city of Sandusky is with $35,000 to $38,000. I think most of our employees in the city of Sandusky make more than that. And most of the employees in the city of Sandusky, I would venture to guess, do not live in the city of Sandusky. So, I mean, this is probably more appropriate for Mr. Waddington. There's probably a thought process that went into why employees get it cheaper than residents. But I would think that it might be something we look at next year. You know, we voted for it, and I didn't want to bring it up during the consent agenda, but if you did it residents, you'd get all the employees that lived in the city. That might be a little more fair. Or if you have a plausible excuse of why that happened, I'm following here.
Waddington.
Are we going to pull our entries out Saturday in the Santa run?
In the what?
Man, I signed you up with me to run in the Santa run.
Yeah.
Does that have something to do with the golf course rates?
No.
That's what I'm talking about.
No, I think I know how it happens. You know, it start out, let's give the seniors a break. And then somebody says, well, we better give the military a break. You know, and then I'll pretty soon, well, let's give the employees a break. Pretty soon, everybody's got a break, but the guy that's making $23,000 that lives in the city of Sandusky paying all the other taxes.
I see where you're going with that, and I did look at those rates, and I have to tell you, in my earlier days, I played a lot of golf on a lot of courses, and I would challenge anyone to find rates as effective as those are. I think I think we've gone from $11 to $12.
Yeah.
Or maybe from $12 to $13.
That's why I preface with, I haven't golfed a long time. So if it's still if it's half of where they can go golf anywhere else, I'm fine with it.
It is a terrific bargain, and it is a friendly course.
It is nice, yeah, I remember.
Mr. Chairman, we also have, we lucked out this year, and I think Mr. Whirling's here, we got St. Mary's golf team back and the Sandusky golf team, so that's important. I mean, for us, going forward. Yeah. And it's a lunch pail golf course. It's only a 9-hole. It's not an 18-hole golf course. But I think if we have a good week this week, we'll crack 250 for the year, right? Good, yeah. Yeah, it was 244 or something last week. And I'm hoping we're selling passes, and we've been pushing them. Terrific. And that's going to be out there all this week pretty much, Tuesday through Friday. As long as the weather holds. So we're hoping that we can sell some passes on these warm days.
Great. Thank you. Additional items of old business. Items of new business.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Murray?
I need to ask for 2 executive sessions, so I'm going to make a motion that we hold 1 executive session for union negotiations.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Discussion?
My only discussion would be that at that executive session, we'd like to have the commissioners and Commissioner-elect Pajali, the city manager, the assistant city manager, the law director, and the finance director.
Mrs. Myers, will you poll the commission on that motion?
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Poole,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Ms. Twine,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington,
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
That motion passed. Mr. Wine, looked like you had a question.
Since we have extra characters, that room upstairs will be tight. Can we stay in here?
Mr. Hamilton, we can stay in here, not inconvenience you.
Because that room's too small to put.
Good move. Good move. Excellent. Mr. Murray,
Second,
that motion is passed.
second executive session finally, to finish the city manager evaluation, and for that, we would simply need the commissioners and Commissioner-elect Pajali. I don't know, Ms. Twine, did we want Mr. Whoopser for that, or we just need to take the final step?
I'll need for him to stick around.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, very good, thank you.
Have a motion? We have a
Second.
motion and a second? Discussion? Ms. Myers, will you poll the commission on that motion, please?
Yes. Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Poole,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Ms. Twine,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington,
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
That executive session is set. I have I have a host of motions under new business. I have 2 vacancies that I would like to fill on a couple of our boards. On the Community Relations Commission, I have forwarded the application of Mr. Greg Peugeot to each commissioner for your review. Greg is a graduate of Sandusky High School, Mount Union College, and he has a law degree. He serves as an in-house counsel for a major insurance company. He was recommended by our Director of Diversity, Marcus Harris. I've known Greg for the last 10 years. His family has deep roots in this community. I and Commissioner Harris believe that Mr. Peugeot will be an asset to this board. I'll ask for a motion to approve his appointment.
So moved.
Been a motion and a second. Discussion. Ms. Myers, you poll the commission on that motion, please.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Poole,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Ms. Twine,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington, Mr. Harris.
Yes.
That appointment is approved. Second appointment is to our cemetery board. I forwarded to this commission the application of Mr. Brett Ninke. Mr. Ninke is a graduate of Sandusky High School and is the grandson of the founders of Balcony Monuments. Brett brings with him a history of service to almost every cemetery in our area through his monument business. His experience and willingness to serve will be an asset to our cemetery board. As the liaison of this board, Commissioner Harris is supportive of this appointment. I'll ask for a motion to approve his appointment.
So moved.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Discussion? Ms. Myers, will you poll the commission on that motion, please?
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Poole,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Ms. Twine,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington, Mr. Harris.
Yes.
That appointment is set. I also will need a motion to approve for the approval of the 2022 commission meeting dates that have been circulated to each commissioner by our commission clerk.
So moved.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Discussion. Ms. Myers, you poll the commission on that motion, please.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Poole,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Ms. Twine,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington, Mr. Harris.
Yes.
That motion is approved. Also need a motion for a public hearing for our meeting on 12/21 for the 2022 budget.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Discussion? Ms. Myers, you poll the commission on that motion, please.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Poole,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Ms. Twine,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington, Mr. Harris.
Yes.
That motion is approved. I am going to ask for a motion for the swearing in of commissioners at our next meeting, 12/21. I don't need a motion for that.
So move.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Discussion. Ms. Myers, you poll the commission on that motion.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Poole,
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington? Mr. Harris?
Yes.
That motion is approved, and we will be sworn in at our next meeting. I'm pleased to announce that our city manager has selected Mario D'Amico to serve as Sandusky's new fire chief. We're looking forward to his swearing in at our next meeting. That's going to be a busy meeting. I want to take an opportunity to thank my selection committee that worked on this process. They were John May, who represented the civil service. They were Lee Alexakos, Levada Wilson, and Drew Meredith. We submitted 3 finalists to Mr. Webster for his selection. I'm grateful for their service on behalf of this city. I'm equally grateful to Jim Green for his decades of service to this community and our fire department. On 2 occasions, Jim has served as our interim chief. Not an easy role to fill under any circumstance, but on both occasions, Jim has done so with distinction and with integrity. Our city thanks Jim Green. Any additional items of new business, commissioners? If there are any residents who'd like to provide a comment on any item affecting city business, I'd ask you to step to the podium, share with us your name and address, and we'll hear your thoughts.
My name is James Wilson. I'm concerned about increasing crime in the area. Could you gentlemen tell me whether it's increasing or decreasing at this time? Is there an accurate status of that?
Mr. Wilson, this forum is not designed to be a question and answer forum. You're certainly welcome to state your comments regarding any items regarding the city, and I'm more than happy to listen to them, provided you stay civil with those comments.
I don't think I was uncivil. I asked a question.
I didn't say that you were.
Okay, I'm just concerned about increasing crime in the city. I hear gunshots or fireworks. I'm not going to stick my head out there.
Sure.
I see that there's increasing weapons. I'm concerned. I know at your level, you can only tell me, is it increasing or decreasing, correct?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bynes.
I'm sure that we can get you police reports over the monthly reports of run volume.
I'm sorry to be disrespectful.
Yeah, I know with a fire that, the increases in fire exponentially has gone up in emergency calls, EMS calls, those sort of things, but it's an elderly population now. It's a little bit different. So I'm sure that Chief Oliver can get you all the reports that you want. I don't know if you need a public records request.
I can find that on my own. This is the first time I've been here. I am a resident. I do have concerns. That's my point.
Yeah, we're all concerned about crime. Yeah, that's for sure. And I'm sorry, we just don't have the answer off the top of our head. I mean, I don't know if you mean by the month or this year. Or,
it changes regularly. I looked at the FBI crime data for the city of Sandusky.
Well, we certainly have all the data you would need.
Okay. Mr. Wilson, if you share with us your address, a contact point for you, Chief Oliver will be more than happy to provide you with that information.
Him already, sir.
You have, okay.
I'm just stating a point here as a resident, that my concern is increasing crime.
Thank you for your comment.
About that, I am not sure, but as a resident, I am concerned about that. Myself and going forward in the city.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Poole.
Thank you, sir. His concerns about, he's expressed that he is concerned about safety in the community, and I think it's reasonable, as we said, we don't have the answer to the question, but I would certainly expect that, that what he's looking for, if not from us directly, through us, from the police chief, his take on where are we, with some data to support it, and which from there we can determine what we need to do, or he can determine what needs to be done. The chief can decide, tell us what we need to do, if nothing at all.
I agree, Mr. Poole.
But that's where we're at.
That's an easy task.
His concern is absolutely worthwhile.
Sure, I agree, and I think I indicated that to Chief Oliver.
He did.
We'll has a contact point for this gentleman, and we'll ask him to respond directly to him.
You should respond to all of it. We should know.
Sure.
Chief Butler.
Greetings, Commissioners. Tom Lamarca, 206 48th Street. In respect to the Sandusky Fire Department boat motors being replaced, you blew a boat motor on a 6-year-old engine, is what I'm kind of hearing, and I don't quite understand how you blow.
2006.
2006?
16 years.
Well, I would bet if you go out and find any 2006 boat out there that 99% of them are still running just fine. So I still question why we're not looking at repairing that motor over the next 3 months versus buying 2 used motors for $27,000 that have been used in the salt water, not knowing what the likelihood of those engines surviving is. And then also, why was this put on the manager's report and not on the agenda as we pass so many things here under an emergency measure? So why, and obviously you had the information before today, so it didn't need to be as part of the manager's presentation. The bike pathway design work, over $2 million now, that's insane. You have to agree, that's insane. Those architects are making way too much money to draw a bunch of lines and to pick up a few easements. Another couple of grants for $50,000 and $100,000, and granted, I know that they were out there in the past and that these individuals have spent a huge amount of money, but I venture to say that George Sortino would not spend $225,000 per room on any hotel he ever built, and that's about what that equates to if you've got $2 million in 9 rooms. So why do we continue to give grants to people that don't need the money? That's just my beef. That's my personal beef. It just seems the haves always get it, and those that are kind of just having a little bit of a challenge here and there don't get the grant that maybe they should. That's it for tonight. Thank you very much.
Tim Schwanger, 362 Sheffield Way. One suggestion I would give for the new commission coming in next year is that years ago, and I think Commissioner Murray was still here at the time, and maybe Mr. Waddington, each commissioner would give an update at each commission meeting on their individual committees and boards that they were on. I was looking for an update tonight from someone about the Jackson Street Pier Ice Rink. As you may have seen in the paper or on Facebook or whatever, there was severe damage this past weekend from the west-northwest winds that we frequently get. Let me take this off. That we frequently get in the fall and through winter. And it's my opinion, living here for 64 years of my life, that if it's happened once, it's going to happen again. So I'm hoping that when the vendor comes in, so I understand the vendor is going to come in sometime this week and assess the damage, that we find a way not to put Humpty Dumpty back together again in the fashion in which it was in to begin with. That we do something that we're not going to see damage over and over again as the winter progresses. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Additional comments from the public? Not, we will recess we will recess for our first executive session.
Yes.
Here.
Here, we're staying here.
Why start now? Mike, have a bourbon yet?
Yeah, no. Kelly actually invited me.
We have returned from our recess in executive session, and I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second, discussion. We are adjourned.